Thank you for joining us for our Capacity Building 2020. Capacity Building 2020 is our month of a strategic process in which we grow and develop, increasing our ability to serve. Now join us as we begin our session. Great evening, everyone. My name is PJ Lucky, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Capacity Building session. Tonight's session is insights and lessons learned from an entrepreneur. And today we have entrepreneur Indra Sen with us. Let me read a little bit about Indra, and we're just so excited to have him. Indra is he's a Connecticut small business owner. Indra is a child immigrant from India and China. Indra was born in Connecticut with an Indian father and Chinese mother who raised him and his sister in the town of Ridgefield. With thanks to great K-12 public schools in Ridgefield, Kendra had the opportunity to attend Georgetown University, a great Jesuit institution, I must say, where he won a national scholarship for public service and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa and received the Thomas P. McTighe Prize, the university's high honor. After graduation, Indra worked on Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, engaged in home rebuilding efforts in post-Katrina New Orleans, and co-founded a nonprofit that was recognized by President Bill Clinton for its work in educating refugee youth. Indra then received a full scholarship to attend Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government, where he graduated with a master's in public policy and was the recipient of a Harvard Public Service Fellowship and the Paul Daisy Soros Fellowship. After Harvard, Indra moved back to Connecticut, where he worked in an inner city public school. He subsequently served as a senior aide to the mayor of Connecticut's largest city, where he helped secure funding from the Connecticut state legislature for local education, public safety, and economic development projects. Indra is married to his college sweetheart, Christine, who also attended Georgetown and Harvard. They reside in Ridgefield, where they are raising two sons in the same wonderful community in which Indra was raised in. Indra is a member of the Ridgefield Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you again. Let's welcome Indra Sen.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for such the kind introduction, PJ. I appreciate it. Thank you all for the opportunity to participate in the series led by Triumphant Christian Church. I know two of your parishioners, PJ Lucky and Lamont Daniels, and they represent the very best of us and have dedicated their entire life to helping others. So that's why tonight I'm grateful to be able to pay it forward a little bit, spend time with you all, hopefully share some insights, but also learn from you all. I'm going to explore capacity building from three unique perspectives. One, as an entrepreneur who also owns an early childhood center in Connecticut. Two, as a former management consultant who has advised large businesses on some of their toughest challenges. And third, as a fellow citizen with a wife and two kids who is trying to raise his family in the time of pandemic and facing perhaps similar challenges that you might be facing. Lamont has told me that your experience runs the gamut from being aspiring entrepreneurs to individuals that have established businesses. So I hope you find this session beneficial. Before we get started, PJ, and if the technology is not able to do that, I understand. I was wondering if folks could just perhaps either via video or just via chat, just quickly introduce themselves by name and perhaps, where they're at in terms of a business or entrepreneurship, whether they've started one, they're establishing one. So I'll pause and take some guidance from you there.
Awesome. Thank you, Indra. So those that are joining us right now, please feel free to write it in the chat, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Let us know where you're from. And if you're an entrepreneur, I do see we have some folks from Arizona watching. There we go. Arnetta.
All right, Arnetta watching from Arizona. Lucky you.
I see some other folks that just says, welcome. Thank you, Indra.
Okay. Well, I'll continue on, but if folks want to interject with questions at any
Here we go.
time or anything that relates to them in particular. Okay, I see Lysandra Tomlin Rents, up and coming entrepreneur from Stratford, Connecticut. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Awesome. Seeing entrepreneur as well. Oh, and I apologize. That's my family in the background. That's my wife. She's taking care of the two kids while I do this, so I'm very grateful for her as well. Anthony from Norwalk. I was born there. That's fantastic. Small business from 2006. Awesome. So I see a number of people who, are working potentially to start a business, and I also see people who have been established for 15 plus years. So, please feel free to interject. I want this to be helpful, and I want to use examples to apply to you to help you because, obviously I studied at institutions, but academics are only as helpful as they apply to reality, and they help you on the day-to-day. So would like to hear from you later on at this point as well. So as a management consultant, I was taught about the 5 C's of business. And the 5 C's, this is what large corporations, billion-dollar corporations, this is what they're honing in on. And, this is advice that I'm providing you that, different consultants have utilized to help to solve these challenges, whether it's how do we grow, how do we cut costs, how do we innovate in a time of challenge. So the 5 C's are: 1, the context of the business, what type of industry you're in. 2, the customer. Who are you focusing on? Who is buying your product? Who is your clientele? 3, cost management. That's also really important. One thing, yes, it's important to boost revenues, but if you don't, manage costs, then you find yourself running as a nonprofit. The 4th is capabilities of your organization, your operating model, how you make decisions, your organizational structure. And the 5th relates to your competitor. Obviously my motto is don't chase the competition, but chase the dream. But sometimes you have to see who else is doing and how they're playing and how it plays out to think through. So tonight, I would like to focus on 2 of the C's for the conversation: the customer and capabilities. Specifically within the customer, I'd like to help you all answer the question, who is my customer now during this time? During the time of COVID-19, the customer has changed for a lot of businesses, and I'll share my personal example, but a lot of examples of my friends who own barbershops, bakeries, planning businesses, tutoring businesses. It's definitely changed. Within capabilities, I would like to help you answer, how can we effectively make decisions within an organization? You often heard of the saying analysis paralysis. Sometimes making effective, clear, accountable decisions can really help organizations. So we'll dive into that, and I'll share with you a framework. Customer and capabilities. A lot of organizations are asking these questions at this time, from small nonprofits to businesses like barbershops to even large businesses like the NFL and NBA. And finally, I'd like to end by answering your questions and having a deeper conversation on these topics. So PJ, feel free to interrupt me as questions come up from the audience, and feel free to stop me. So we're going to start with that first bucket, customer analysis. So let's start with customer. Chances are, if you own a business, your customer has drastically changed their attitude over this month. My friend owns a barbecue restaurant, which was recently named as Food and Wine's best barbecue restaurant in Connecticut, but they weren't allowed to have customers inside their building for 3 months. I watched a playoff basketball game last night between the Miami Heat and Boston Celtics. I don't know if you watched some of that game. Great game with no fans in the stadium. So the NBA is definitely thinking about that challenge as well. And on my end, I owned a preschool daycare that had people who needed our services at a time to people who, chose to social distance. And let me add that personal and public health are very important, and all these changing attitudes are legitimate. There are things as a business owner you can control, and there are things that you can't control. However, you can control your attitude as well as think about how you think about your customer. So when I think about the customer, here are some helpful questions to ask. 1, who is your customer at this time? 2, Why are they your customer? And 3, to what extent would redefining and changing your customer affect your organization's mission or identity? I'm going to explain how my business did it, but I would love to hear about how some of your businesses are thinking through those questions. So, to answer those questions, my own business, owning an early childhood center, serving children 6 weeks to 6 years, including my own 2 sons, did 3 things. First, we engaged in segmentation to see who was using our services and which were most popular. Segmentation is just one of those fancy academic words, meaning, who is buying your services, what's their different characteristics, maybe what's their different demographic data, such as race, age, gender, socioeconomic data. So we did that to look through, who is needing our services at this time. Secondly, we closely monitored current events to see how they affected people's attitudes. Obviously, our state was in a very different place in April, May, and June. And listening to different people thinking about in terms of daycare. What do they think about public health? What do they think about public safety? And third, we employed forward-looking thinking to anticipate future changes. So let me provide specifics. When we looked at our primary customer of our daycare and preschool, it was usually teachers who needed childcare. But guess what? All the schools closed back in March and April. So guess what? Those teachers did not really need childcare. Plus, schools close anyway for June, July, and August, so they might not need it then. So then we thought about, well, who might need childcare right away? Essential workers. That's who, like police officers, firefighters, nurses. This really pushed our traditional thinking of, let's focus on teachers, working parents who, need us for a certain period of time to, who needs us right now? We also monitored to see how needs might change over time. For example, while we did not offer a kindergarten program traditionally, we saw that in-person kindergarten in Connecticut, at least for September in many places, was only going to be 2 days a week. Raise your hand if you need childcare for more than 2 days a week. Certainly, I own a business and I need that, more than 2 days a week. We knew that some of our parents had to go into work 5 days a week, and 2 days of kindergarten, going to the public schools for 2 days, as well as being home for 3 days doing some distance learning, wasn't going to work for their needs. So we explored that possibility, found demand, and now offered a kindergarten program, and that filled up. Was not on our radar a year ago. Again, thinking who is our customer and what do they need? I'm curious to hear from some of you all, and PJ, maybe you can open up the comments. Can you guys share an example of how your thinking about your customer has changed during the time of COVID? Maybe who your customer was back in January and who is your customer now, and kind of how that has shifted or how that has changed, or different options that you're weighing. I'll pause, PJ, here.
So we were definitely monitoring the chat. So as questions come in, I'll be sure to post them, Indra. I do know we have another question, and whenever you're ready about funding, let me know if you're ready for that one, or we can wait till another time.
Okay, sounds good. We can jump into that question. I do want to make it interactive, like I've been talking for a while. So before moving into the next framework or talking more about the customer, I'm happy to take on that question related to funding.
Great, here we go. Actually, great. Folks are responding back. And here we go. I'll go with the framework first, and then I'll pass you the funding so we can stay on topic. Here we go.
Sounds good.
First response.
Great. Thanks, Norja. So she shared that more of the same in her work, but increased demand for mental health services. You own a personal infrastructure. Great question. I'm just noting down the questions and I'll try to summarize them. right. Sandra G shared, my customers expanded. I started from single parents to everyone, young adults, elderly, and families. Great. So what I heard from you all is that during this time, uh, one, you an right? You typically serve maybe single parent families or one group, and now you're serving everybody. And then, um, for some of you, you've actually experienced an increase in demand, and that increase in demand, whether you're a small private practice or say a larger early childhood center, might cause some tension or strain as you think through personnel and that you're growing to keep up with the demand. So those are great insights, and let me just quickly address that. The one about the customer changing is an interesting one because it makes you reflect on your original identity, the original mission of your business, and can you keep up with expanding the customer? So even in my own case, I explained the example of primarily serving teachers to then potentially moving on to serving essential workers, but now to then serving teachers as school has reopened, essential workers as well as other people who might need childcare, who's traditionally say their parents or grandparents watch the kids, but during a public health crisis might feel wary about little kids being watched by older adults, given especially the data that we've seen where older people might disproportionately be affected negatively by COVID-19. So in some cases, an expanded customer base might be a blessing in disguise. You're seeing increased demand, which might be good for your business, but then it also creates challenges in terms of personnel and the infrastructure. One comment related to that is to think through, well, how does your changing your customer base affect the overall quality of your business? So, Norja mentioned mental health services, and sorry if it wasn't you, Norja, I apologize. You need to ensure quality, right, with mental health services. You have a private practice, and just because there's increased demand doesn't mean you have man or human power to serve that need. So it sort of creates this unique tension of, well, how many people can I serve? How many people can I help without affecting the overall quality of the business? And so that's something, I would encourage you all to think about in terms of the customer of not just the short term, but the long term and sort of sustainability. That's super critical, as well as personnel, right? You want to make sure that you can maintain quality with demand. And sometimes getting that customer ring and the phone call, hey, I'm interested in your business. Hey, I'm interested in using it. The instinct is, oh, well, that's great. We want you to join our family. We want to serve you. We want to help you fulfill that need. But also to take a moment and pause to think of, well, how does my staffing best able to serve that need? Will me serving increased demand affect the overall quality of my work? Will decreased quality then potentially affect the overall reputation of my business? And will the overall reputation of my business then actually in turn circle up, affect your demand? Not sure if that feedback was helpful or not, but I'll pause again, PJ, to see if there's any more questions or if there might be some follow-up questions from Miss G and from Norja. Oh, I see someone in the chat. No problem, Norja, and congratulations, keep it up, but definitely think through the quality piece. Not that you're not thinking about the quality piece, but obviously you're working in a field that's highly professionalized. I assume, and I know you probably, have a lot of credentials and worked hard for those credentials. And it's a limited amount. And sometimes, you might not find those credentials in the field, right? As my wife and I hire early childhood teachers, we have very, very strong um, standards and very strong expectations. So while we might get a phone call and a parent might ask, well, don't you have that empty classroom? Can't you take my kid tomorrow? For me, our own children attend our early childhood center. So if you're not good enough for my kids, you're not good enough for any kids. And so that's a unique tension that, we're experiencing, and I'm sure some of you are all experiencing as things reopen during this time. PJ, I'll pause to see, are there any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'd like to move on the capabilities piece around decision effectiveness. Okay, we can maybe before moving on that, I see Anthony has a question that says, where can a new entrepreneur go for startup funds outside of loans? All right, so just give me a second. I'm formulating my thoughts and I'll get you a response. So Anthony, I'm glad you asked that question. You're starting a business, but where do you get the money? Where do you get the investment? And you don't want to invest all your own personal money into it because you got to balance your own risk with what you can do. And sometimes loans might not necessarily be the best option. You get a different set of options. You look at the interest rates and you're like, well, how am I going to start paying back this loan right away when I'm just starting my business? What I've seen work effectively in the field, what I've heard from friends is oftentimes you're not just looking for money, you're looking for an investor. One of my wife's favorite shows is Shark Tank. And the sharks there, whether it's Mark Cuban, Mr. Wonderful, Dame Dash, the founder of Fubu, other people, the entrepreneurs are not just looking for money, but they're looking for those investors who can provide strategic insight and grow your business with you and provide you that. So in a way, my recommendation might be to potentially explore who might be your partners in the business. Now, that's an important question to ask because what does partners mean? Does that mean they're a co-owner? Does that mean they're co-running the business with you? Or does it involve something more like, oh, maybe this person just invests some money in there. They're expecting a certain percentage of the profits, but they're down in you. They advise you importance, whether it's who to hire, where to establish your first business or office, help you define who the customer is, helping you prepare and launch your product. So that's another option. And oftentimes you might find that group from mentors, people in your church, religious institution, former teachers, family, but oftentimes what they say about mixing family and business, friends, same thing applies there as well, peers. Just casting a net to see what can people potentially offer. How can they make it a mutually beneficial relationship, and then what's the next step to take? There's also a number of online networks. They're sort of like loans, but they're more low interest loans where there's peer lending, meaning it's an everyday person like you wants to lend money in a specific field, very passionate about that field, wants to support entrepreneurs like yourself, doesn't necessarily want to put the money in the stock market, wants to see small business owners grow, and small business owners are the enemy. So finding some of those sites where there might be, low interest lending that might be more beneficial for you, for people who are looking to make a social impact. So those are other options related to loans. What I might recommend and what I've seen others adopt is look at all your options and choose potentially what might be the best route for you. One thing I'll just mention about loans is that you want your business to be sustainable. So I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs ranging from restaurants to barbershops get a loan, get the infusion of cash, but then pay back at a high interest and at a shorter period of time. And while they're trying to grow their business and pay for staff, pay for rent, pay for utilities, we'll also have to pay back for that loan. and then are running out of resources to pay themselves or pay the business to help that grow. So hopefully that's some helpful insight for you, Anthony. And if other folks have helpful thoughts, I'm by no means an expert on this. None of these strategies are guaranteed, just help to share helpful insight. Would love to hear from the audience as well. So let me pause there, PJ. See if there are additional thoughts or additional questions. Great. Glad you found that helpful, Anthony. So to close quickly on the customer, and then want to move to the next one about effectiveness, chances are you're going to have to revisit this customer as times change. We're headed into the fall. Our country yet has had a proven vaccine. Flu season's about to start. There's a lot of uncertainty around there. So, recommend you to constantly think about who the customer is, who they are, who they might be, and use that information to think through how your business might evolve over the times. And that might be something done in the short term, but then maybe you're thinking about something in December, something next summer. I only imagine for people like Norja, where people become more isolated, more self-quarantined, less able to folks, and perhaps health services might increase. So, you might see even unprecedented demand that you've never seen before, or the field might not be able to withstand. So helpful to revisit those customer questions, because you might have to make trade-offs, because you might not be able to serve everyone. There might be this huge need, and then you as a business owner might have to strategically think through, well, who's most important to you? Who do you want to serve? Who will help your business survive? It's because you previously predominantly served single parents. Well, the need has increased overall, but is it important to you to serve that core group that you initially served? Those are questions that I can't answer for myself, no right or wrong, but that you and others will continue to revisit as the times change and evolve. Great. The next topic I'd like to transition. Great, Norja. Those are great questions about how long have I been an entrepreneur and what are my greatest lessons as an entrepreneur. Let's touch on the greatest lessons piece at the end, just because I think it'll be helpful to wrap all the lessons together. But how long have I been an entrepreneur? I've not been an entrepreneur for a long time. We bought and owned this early childhood center since May 2019. I've actually spent my whole life really in the public sector, serving as a management consultant, advising large nonprofits and large organizations, including the Girl Scouts. I also have worked in government, which is where I met Lamond, worked in city public schools. So I haven't been an entrepreneur for the longest time, but have been exposed to these wonderful frameworks. When I was at Harvard, I was lucky to take a few courses at Harvard Business School. And for me, applying these for just some of the first time, and I'm learning as I'm doing. So by no means am I an entrepreneur. We have a gentleman from Norwalk who's been a business owner for 15 years. You probably have a wealth of advice too, and hopefully you'll be leading a workshop soon. But yes, I did want to provide you that caveat. The next topic I'd like to talk about is within capabilities. And the big piece within capabilities is decision effectiveness. How do you just pause to think this question? How many of you have experienced being a part of a team that couldn't make a decision on a tough question, including should we grow? Should we hire this person? Should we change our course? I certainly have been a part of dozens of organizations, including a basketball team, to an advisor as a management consultant, to working in the nonprofit field where we couldn't make a decision, and that really hurt us by not making a decision. Or we made the wrong decision because we did not get enough input. Or maybe the person making the decision wasn't the right person to make that decision. Shouldn't get input instead of being the final decider. Or in a case where the decision roles weren't clear, you know, even my wife will ask me sometimes, well, given the situation, what should we do with our kids? And I'm thinking, do you want my input? Do you want me to agree with you? Do you want me to recommend something? Do you actually want me to decide? It's usually not that. It's not for me to decide. Do you want me to perform a task? Yes, it's usually about perform a task. Be curious and pause here to think about a member of an audience to share about a tough decision they recently made, because I would like to apply this framework, which is used by billion-dollar companies to help them make decisions. I'd like to share that framework with you, but then I'd also like to apply it in your case to think about, well, maybe what could have been done differently with that tough decision you had to make. So PJ, I'll pause here to see what audiences, who audience really make a tough decision and some context around there. All right, as the comments flow in, I'll just talk about, I've seen decision paralysis affect many organizations. And honestly, it can lead to individuals and team members feeling frustrated, results not being heard, and goals not being achieved. And I would like to share a helpful tool on decision effectiveness, which will help decisions being made, individuals and teams feeling happier about their choice, results being delivered, and goals being achieved. This tool and framework, which again I told you is being used by billion-dollar companies, but it doesn't really matter that they're billion-dollar companies. All small businesses started somewhere, as my good friend Lamont has shared. It can be helpful tools for us as well. It's called the RAPID framework. And each of the letters for decision rules to have the organization be more effective. The R stands for recommend. This is someone who might be recommending a decision or action within a question. The A stands for agree. This might be someone who must formally agree to a decision. P stands for perform. This is someone who, or multiple people who must perform a decision. I stands for input. This stands for someone who has to get input or has to give input in making a decision. And the D stands for decide. This is who makes the decision. So let's take an illustrative example now just to kind of show you how the framework might play out. Of a couple who must decide, who should we invite to our wedding? I know a lot of you have worked through those questions. Definitely Lamont, definitely PJ, a number of you. And how might this framework apply there? So the R is for recommend. Now for your guardians, they might have recommendations, and you might have to listen to those recommendations about potential family you don't want to upset, maybe a great aunt who has a beef with a great uncle, different family politics, or different family friends who are special to your parents or guardians who might, need to be there. Now, your venue might be the A for agree. They might be agreeing to who's allowing the capacity for the wedding. I have a friend who recently had a 350 person wedding, but the venue could only hold 250. Well, the venue's not going to agree to that because that's going to impact the fire code. That's going to improve safety. And this was not during the time of COVID. Let me give you a caveat of that. But that they might be the agree. The P is perform, and that's maybe the stationery company who's involved in issuing the invites. The I is input. Maybe that's your bridal party giving input in terms of who you should invite, different friends, different family members, different people in your life during different stations you might want to invite. And the D might be who must decide. And that's probably you and your prospective spouse helping the decision. So the letters, it's important to remember that they reflect roles, but the decisions might not be in that order, right? The R is recommend. First, you start with the decision and you think through, well, who might need to recommend? who might need to agree, who might need to perform, who might need to provide input, and who might not be decide. Now, let's take that framework and think through some tougher questions that your business might face during this time that I know a number of you thought through. One might be, should we remain open during COVID-19? Two, should we serve customers during COVID-19? What are the potential risks there to the customers or employees? Three, what's our policy to help keep employees safe? So you can think through those different questions and, well, who might in my organization might need to agree? Who might be needing to provide recommendations? Maybe that's a lawyer, maybe that's an accountant, maybe that's a doctor or a nurse. Well, who ultimately must have to decide? Is that you as a business owner, or is that your board? You can see how decisions might go haywire when you're not involving the right people, but also you're not giving the right people the right roles. Because there might be some people who you don't want to decide, and maybe there's some people who you only want to recommend and perhaps not be that person to agree. Because if they have to agree, that might be a roadblock in getting to a decision being made. I'd like the audience to share a tough decision they made recently. What were the decision roles? And perhaps what would you have done differently now that you know about this framework? And as audiences populate in, I'm happy to share, a personal example from my life in the past too. All right. Well, while we wait for the audience to respond, let me share examples from my own life about decisions we made and what I would have done differently now knowing the RAPID framework. So, as you heard, before in the past, with a bunch of college friends of mine, we led a nonprofit in the Middle East working in refugee camps and had the funding from organizations like the Clinton to really back us. And at the time, we were working in only one refugee camp, providing education programs to refugee youth who really needed that. And we received this outside funding. We're 3 recent college grads graduating from Georgetown. We're young, we're ambitious. We've received more funding. We want to serve more families. We want to serve more people. So the question that was asked that we had to face was, should we expand to more refugee camps? And in that case, the 3 co-founders and I were the recommenders, the agreeers, the performers, the inputters, and the deciders. And we expanded really fast. We had the chance to serve hundreds of more refugee youth and families, but because it grew too fast, it oftentimes put an additional strain in our organizational capacity, in our emotional state, and in our own organization's resources. So it did help people, but we grew too fast. And if we were to do that differently, I think we probably would have had different village elders in the different refugee camp provide input in terms of, well, what does it take to run a successful program in this specific refugee camp versus that specific refugee camp? Yes, you have the funding secured, but executed at the same level. For the deciders, perhaps it shouldn't just been the 3 co-founders. Perhaps we should have involved other staff, other volunteers to help us make that decision to think through, well, I know you want to serve that other refugee camp and they have a need, but those 2 camps are 7 hours away. How can you run 2 simultaneous camps at the same time? Are 2 co-founders here and 1 co-founder here? Are 3 of you here and 0 of you there? What's the issue in that case? Performers, I think we wouldn't have changed differently. It's different personnel executing. But in terms of agree, maybe that's something we should have raised to our board first, our board of advisors, to help us think through, well, yes, we have to rubber stamp and agree to the decision, before you all just go run and expand. And, again, we're young, ambitious, we're 22-year-old, but definitely have benefited from the guided wisdom of our elders, who are also people who are on our board, who are experienced, who've gone through these own challenges themselves when they were younger. And that's how we would have done it differently. And I think we would have made the better decision to grow, but grow slower in a way where, we wouldn't be doing trade-offs between quantity and quality. Would like to pause there to see if the audience. Okay, great. An audience has a question of, should I hire an assistant? Great, from Sandra. Any of you are going through a tough decision, or perhaps want to bring up a past decision was tough? So let's take Sandra's example. Should I hire an assistant? So Sandra, I'm actually going to turn this question back to you. In this decision, who would be the person who helps provide you a recommendation? Who is the person that you might need to agree with you, whether that's a co-investor or co-founder? Who is the person who's going to perform this decision? Who do you think should give you input? And, D is who should ultimately decide? And I assume that's you, but would be curious to hear what decision roles you would assign to different people, because you can't do it all yourself. Just pause for her to respond, and then we'll also see if any of you have other questions.
So Andrew, we have a few other questions.
And sorry for that noise in the background. That's my young son.
We have a few different questions on a few other different topics. I'm not sure if you just want to write them down and get to them later.
Yep, I'll write them down. Go ahead.
We have one from Winnie Patrice. How do you choose your target market? And then we have Michelle Bonnie G. I'm looking to get your thoughts on, she's considering a program that encompasses development of the total child academically, emotionally, and socially for second grade to eighth graders. She has some concerns about workspace, employees, and funding.
Great.
And Sandra just replied.
Okay, great. Got it. Well, let me touch base on Sandra's response. I apologize if I enunciate your name incorrectly, and then want to open up to question answer period and try to work through those questions with you. So Sandra said, I'm currently working through this myself. And that's, definitely a lot of entrepreneurs are starting in that same place, and you feel the whole weight of the world of you. But something about Christian church there before is there's a wealth of really smart, really intelligent, mission-driven, God-fearing, aligned people who are wonderful resources. And so, in your case, I might think through, well, who in my network might be helpful to give me insight into this? And so, I've used Lamont to help me make decisions about my business. And I'll call up Lamont and I'll ask him, well, what do you think? What is your opinion as a friend to friend, right? And then he's given me input, right? But in other situations, someone like Lamont, who's a licensed social worker, might be able to issue a professional opinion, right? And in that case, maybe they're agreeing or recommending to you. Hiring an assistant, maybe there's different parishioners, Sandra, who went through that same decision as well. And so maybe there's someone who provides you recommendations of, well, here were the criteria that I determined and used to hire myself an assistant. Whether it was A, we had the funding to hire an assistant, 2, there was that right personnel out there where it made it worthwhile, where it was a quality assistant to help drive my work. And then, 3, that assistant is actually improving the work itself and helping the position pay for itself, where I can focus on other things and expanding the business. Again, that's a complete hypothetical, but would encourage you to use this framework and perhaps put friends that you might have in different decision roles. And ultimately, you're the small business owner. Ultimately, it's your choice. Ultimately, you get to decide, but maybe there's different people you want to help you provide input or also potentially perform a decision. Maybe you didn't, and you put a job description out to your church's listserv to then go actually find that person and they're performing that decision. So I'll pause there. Great, saw that you have homework to do, but again, this is one tool to help you hopefully make a decision that you feel comfortable with, confident about, and it's an effective decision to you and your organization. So perfect. Norja, happy to provide business consulting to entrepreneurs, obviously free of charge. A friend of Lamont is a friend of mine. I'm happy to do this plan and do realize that this is a very public forum, and obviously you're dealing with some sensitive things and obviously in a very sensitive field. So happy to make myself as a resource available. PJ, Lamont are really wonderful people, and I just hope to pay it forward a little bit. So let's move on to Whitney's question, and we can open up into a general question answer period to close. Is how do you define your target market? How do you choose your target market? Whitney, do you mind me asking, what is the general field that you're looking to get into? Because often field might define your market, or it might help, put, tied in a more concentric circle around that market to think through, from serving everybody to serving some folks. And while you respond, I'll just share through how different businesses think about their target market. So you have organizations such as fast food or sports organizations, right? Fast food, a restaurant like Popeyes and McDonald's, they want everyone. Their target, McDonald's signs, billions served. You see all those Popeyes marketing materials, and I personally love Popeyes. You see Wendy's, they're trying to reach everybody, right? Sports organizations, yes, they're trying to reach everyone, but they're more specific. Basketball franchises like the Boston Celtics or Los Angeles Lakers, they're trying to reach basketball fans. They're trying to reach moms and dads, maybe people who have been lifelong fans, or parents who have kids and want to get their kids interested in the sport, where then it becomes a sustaining customer base, a sustainable market. They want to reach their diehard fans because they know the diehard fans show up to the games, buy tickets, watch TV, wear the jerseys, buy the gear. Those are the people in their target market. Yeah, they could focus on everyone, but you have people like my wife who enjoyed watching college basketball at alma mater, but now sees basketball on TV and might not have that passion, has passion for other things. So maybe that's not their target audience and shouldn't be targeting the casual basketball fan, but maybe they should be targeting people like me, the avid fan, the diehard fan, someone who has two young boys. I'm really short, but definitely want to teach my sons the game. And so all those commercials definitely appeal to me. So Whitney responded that health and wellness is her target market. And so that's an interesting point to consider about who to serve there. The questions I might ask is, well, what is a particular challenge that I want to serve in health and wellness? What is it that I'm passionate about? Where is it that I have expertise? And where is it that I have capabilities? Each individual might be different, but those are important questions because health and wellness is a huge field. And is it thinking through, well, my background and training and expertise relates to children. I have a degree that allows me to serve in children. I'm licensed to serve in children. Well, maybe that helps narrow your target market, or at least to start, maybe focusing on children. Or maybe it's a particular challenge that you want to solve. For some, I'll give you an example. I know individuals who have organizations passionate about combating childhood obesity, and their focus is on the child, but also educating the family to specifically work on childhood obesity on a one-to-one level. That's their target market, right? But within that target market, their consumer might be different because that's who they want to serve. But the consumer is always buying and paying for the services. So you might want to combat childhood obesity, but perhaps the parents can't afford it and the children can't afford it. But maybe that's a contract you might receive from the government. Maybe that's a nonprofit that it's issued a letter of interest or intent or a request for proposals to help someone solve that problem. Or, maybe it's a foundation that is willing to provide a grant for entrepreneurs or small businesses who want to tackle this issue and tackle that problem. So that's a dual thing of thinking, who is your target market, but also who is your customer? My target market as an early childhood owner is serving children, but children don't pay for tuition. It's the parents or guardians who pay for tuition. So I'm serving that target market. A slight nuance, it's also, especially, if you're working, we heard another listener, and I'm sorry I forgot your name, about think about, work in terms of encompassing the total child and work related to that. Right, academically, emotionally, and socially for 2nd to 8th graders, but that requires either school consent, parent consent, government consent, consent from pediatrician and doctors. So that might be your market of here's who I want to serve in terms of the client, but your consumer and customer of who's actually purchasing your services is definitely something to consider. You see a lot of advertisements work that way for things like cereal. Their target market is children. And that's why they have the commercials about that cereal and perhaps a toy that came through. But their consumer because parents to buy in the supermarket. Not sure if you found that helpful, but okay. So Whitney has a background in dance, and it's usually moms and children. So that's super interesting as well, where you might think through, now you've narrowed it even more, right? Of using the art form, the professional form of dance to do health and wellness for children. I might ask myself, if I were in your shoes, well, who needs these services? Who might be the consumer, right? Am I going through individuals, which is tough to have individuals sign up? Or am I going through larger organizations who might pay for my services, serve a larger group of individuals, right? You might put up an advertisement and, work that involves you to get 15 people to sign up for your program. Is it more beneficial to target, say, a YMCA or a public school looking for after-school programs, or a government organization looking to incorporate the arts to benefit health and wellness for children, dual-parent families or single-parent families? You might, find a larger audience group in the latter bucket, and that might maximize your ability to serve customers. But then you're not focusing your energies on marketing or all that energy signing up that one customer or 5 customers and 10 customers, and you're getting your customers through actually that organization that already serves a huge group of people. So I'll move on from Whitney's question and then go into the question of encompassing total child, 2nd, 8th grade, you want to serve that population, and you're thinking about workspace, employees, and funding. Start with workplace space. We're living in the COVID-19 world where a lot of businesses are working remotely now, and the need for workspace has changed. I know someone personally who works for Metro North and has seen ridership gone down exponentially. And these people aren't leaving Connecticut and riding that train, whether they're getting on at Bridgeport or Stratford or Fairfield and going into Manhattan, into these fancy and expensive office buildings or office spaces, or everything's in, New York's expensive. So it's going to be expensive in some way. Instead are working remotely and are using more tools um, such as Zoom or StreamYard to conduct their business. So in your case, maybe you actually do need workspace, but the question might be is, do you actually need your own workspace? Do you actually need to buy some of your own workspace or rent some of your workspace? Or if you're working with children and families, will your customer provide that workspace? Maybe you get a contract with a church, which will provide you a room for their Sunday school to work with the children. Maybe you get a contract with public schools, which will allow you actually in the classrooms or section off a part of a school or a classroom to work directly with children. Or maybe it's a community center. That's something to weigh on, because as a business owner, I can tell you every month we have fixed costs too, or costs that we have to pay for in terms of staff, rent, and utilities. Well, maybe in your business specific case, you don't need to rent a space. You don't need to pay for utilities. And that's actually passed on to your customer based on the arrangement. So that's something to think about as well. Or maybe you're weighing on doing the work remotely at home, or renting a small office space like a co-working space to engage with other individuals and be in that innovative and inspiring environment. I can tell you, I have some friends who really struggle to work at home or use their home as office because of kids, or maybe they have their TV there and they want to watch SportsCenter or Netflix and just need to be in an outside environment. That's something I might encourage you to think about when you weigh workspace. You're a retired state certified principal. Well, I worked in a public school. God bless you. That's a really important and amazing work that you've done. Chances are, if you're a certified principal, different public schools, different governments, different entities want you in the building. I'm sure as a school leader, you have a certain presence of you where you walk in a room and your staff will feel that energy, or children will feel that energy. Maybe you actually don't need the workspace, and that's something you might work out with the actual client and customer itself. In terms of employees, we saw another one of your colleagues, Sandra, think through, well, should I hire an additional employee? Should I hire, an executive assistant, which was a specific case? Before you actually hire employees, I would actually test what demand is, or what demand might be initially, or what specific functions you might need that employee. So for example, testing demand, you might find that, by doing a survey of surveying all your former principal friends, all your superintendent friends across different school districts, across different schools, you have tremendous demand. And then you might say to yourself, whoa, well, I don't want to lose all these contracts. I definitely want to start. Maybe I want to start small, but it's critical for me to actually get in these doors and get these contracts and get this business before others do. So I might need to hire and call up my other retired principal friend. And, I know a number of retired principals in Bridgeport, and a lot of them are sometimes looking for intellectual stimulation. So you might find those people here. By testing demand first, seeing their demand, you might need to bring in additional resources. But also you might want to think through, well, what are the specific functions that need to be done, right? If you're a retired principal, you want to focus your energy actually directly working with the client. But, if you're having to do accounting of balancing your profit and loss statement every month, legal, HR, going through the HR, getting all the forms and hiring, paperwork, marketing, advertising, well, then you might say to yourself, well, my expertise is in X, but I spend all my time doing Y. And as a management consultant, I advise CEOs that were wearing so many different hats, they weren't actually being the chief executive officer. They were just actually being an officer. Or I know so many chief of staffs who weren't being that. They weren't being the chief of staff. They were just being staff because they were doing so many other work and putting out so many fires. So I might look through what the demand might be, and also what you need in that specific function for your business to execute, because you might find yourself, well, in order to try this out and make it work, I definitely need to hire an assistant. And maybe you go through some of the same questions of Sandra of, well, if I need an assistant, rapid framework, right? Who's recommending, who's agreeing, who's performing, and what's the level of quality I can find out there, and who can help me execute. Your last piece, and then would like to pause and open to other questions about funding, ties in that piece about customer, right? Well, what are the oh, sorry, that's my youngest son, Kai. Hi, Kai. Hey, buddy. Will you actually go? You want to say hi to everybody? Okay, you can come say hi. Okay. Will you go with mommy? Okay. That's my youngest son, Kai. I wanted to name him Kyrie after Kyrie Irving, but my wife's not the biggest fan of him. You want to say hi, buddy? This is the reason why I do everything. My oldest, and then you're going to go see your baby brother, Caden, right? Okay. You okay, buddy? All right. Take care. Well, I'm glad he was appropriate there. Didn't do anything. Didn't say any curse words or anything. Anyways, talking about the funding piece, you might want to see where there's funding available, whether it's public schools with additional budgets, community centers who are looking to spend money, the state. People might think, well, it's a time of COVID and everyone's cutting their budgets, but as you might find, perhaps they're increasing budgets on things like mental health. I have seen individually a lot of police departments increasing their budgets, say on domestic violence, given the increase of time people are spending home together and the increase in spaces. So yeah, maybe the overall budget got cut for organizations like schools, governments, and so forth. But maybe that particular area niche is something where your expertise could be used. Oh, and sorry, I might have confused Michelle's question with someone else's, but yep, the rapid framework might need, but you're a retired certified school principal. I know for a fact that a lot of my friends who are teachers, a lot of school districts who are teachers, a lot of the teachers who are experienced, or a lot of the teachers who've been there for a while, some of them have opted out and don't feel comfortable either sending their kids to school or working in the school. That's totally legitimate. So school districts have had to hire younger teachers. School districts have hired to hire less experienced teachers. And that school principal, and you've been in their shoes, instead of dealing it with a staff which has maybe 10 or 15 or 5 years of experience on average with people second or third year. So you actually might go and see in the public school department, well, yes, the public school budget went down, but actually the need for leadership coaching for principals, the need for capacity coaching for principals have increased because they're dealing with a whole new staff who are maybe tackling this for the first time, and the demand for the principal has increased. So I'll pause there. I spoke a lot. I am kind of long-winded. And PJ, want to be checking time, but also want to see if there are questions or other things that I might be helpful with. Your question was, I have a recommended set of questions for interviewing potential staff. Let's touch base after the call, and we can talk individually on that, because that oftentimes depends on your field and industry, right? I know some people in the aviation field where they're interviewing pilots or specialists like engineers, and there's a very specific quality control and certifications they have to meet. Like, do you have a pilot's license? Do you have an engineering license? Have you worked on this field before? Where it's very clear to the industry. You have people in more generic industries, right? I have a friend who, as I mentioned, runs a great barbecue restaurant, and they're looking for a different subset of things than someone else might look for, say in public schools or that. So we'd love to touch base with you, and want to help you develop a set of interview questions to use consistently. And the important thing to do is you have to follow state law, you have to follow employment law, labor law, laws that relate to non-discrimination, equal opportunity employment. So chances are, and I know this, there are already a set of questions you have to ask each time, as well as a set of questions you can't ask based on those different sets of laws. So I look forward to touching base with you. Any other questions? And I'll touch on another question that was asked by someone. What have been some of my greatest lessons as a business owner? Again, I'm not an expert. And actually, I'm going to close my door really quickly just because my son is playing with Legos with my wife, and he's very talkative. So give me 2 seconds.
And I know we have some young entrepreneurs also on. Please feel free to take this time to ask Indra any questions that you may have. So especially for those young entrepreneurs, Indra is a great resource. So feel back to you, Indra.
Yep. All right. So my greatest lesson as an entrepreneur has been to compartmentalize and prioritize. Um, compartmentalize meaning you're going to get a ton of demands, whether it's coming from your customer, the consumer, um, the staff, the client, um, your significant other. I'm sorry, my son, he's doing his screaming thing, which he does when you lock doors. So I apologize for the noise. Um, but sometimes you might have 50 demands and you can't tackle all of them at the same time, and it's taxing for you physically, emotionally, and mentally. And you need to compartmentalize and you need to prioritize and focus on that most important thing. Um, Working in government and constituent services, there were days where we would get 50 to 100 customer issues that citizens want their voices heard on and want to have helped and addressed, and all of them are legitimate, and government's purpose is to serve their constituents, but certain ones that elevate in importance. Maybe there's a super critical public health issue, a critical child health and safety issue that you need to focus on first. And you might hear the noise of other people. They're calling every 5 minutes, they're emailing every 10 minutes, they're texting you, you're persistent, but you need to compartmentalize and focus on what you need to focus on, and you need to prioritize. I have a list of 15 to 20 things that I need to get done each day, and I try to get it done. But in the morning, I always circle on, well, here are the 3 that I have to accomplish and I can't leave to accomplish. Because if you try to don't compartmentalize and don't prioritize, forever. I know like PJ and Lamont are married. You have kids, you have other commitments, you might have your church commitment. You can't accomplish everything. So prioritization is huge. And maybe you do have to compartmentalize when you prioritize. And you didn't get to those 10 to 15 other issues. And those other people are still texting you, still emailing you at 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. And I certainly get that. But really important to manage, really important to have to manage your focus. I'll pause. Any other questions from the group? I know I've been long-winded. I appreciate you bearing with me, but hopefully you found, some of you have found this somewhat helpful, or at least a part of it helpful. No problem. Thank you for joining, Michelle. And best of luck, everything. And retired state certified principal, there's definitely a lot of people who need your help. And I'm sure we'd be looking for your services. Okay, we have a question of, if you're thinking about starting a business, are there any important things to know? Anything that can start? I think the fundamental question to ask is, why am I starting a business? Why do I want to start a business? That's a question my wife and I asked when we became entrepreneurs and bought an early childhood center. And it was an important one to weigh, even before we looked at things like, well, how is the industry? How is the field? Is it an environment where we can support our family? Who are the competitors? All those 5 C's. Before we even explore those 5 C's, we asked the question, why? And for us, it was, well, we had one child at the time and a child on the way. We wanted to create a work environment where we could spend our own time with our children, right? Both of us have been educators and are passionate about working with children. And so we definitely wanted to do that as well. And for me, I explained to you I was a management consultant before. I was beckoned and summoned to different parts of the United States on a moment's notice, whether it was California, Pennsylvania, Colorado. And that was difficult for me to leave behind my wife and my young son to just go pursue work on a moment's notice because the client asked to, right? And the client pays the bills. And so we asked ourselves the questions, why, before jumping in. And I think that was very helpful for us because we love what we're doing now and we accomplish things, right? I'm not summoned to a random state on a weekday or weeknight. I get to come home every night to my wife and kids. That means a lot. I get to bring my own kids to work. And, I drive them in the car, and it's so great to put my kids in the classroom, and I get to see them throughout the day, and it's a really wonderful experience. And the last part, really passionate about children, educating children, and it really, it's very rewarding. And so the why before the 5 C's, answer those. And to answer those questions today are the same as the answers, back in May when we embarked on this endeavor. So we'd start with the why first and think through that. Any questions from folks? Absolutely, Tara. Thank you for listening. Lysandra, thank you for coming as well. Sandra, thank you for coming too. Thank you. Absolutely. PJ, I'll turn it over to you. See if there are any more questions. Also want to be respectful of people's time. I know it's a work night, and then happy to connect with people after the call individually to help navigate any challenge.
Awesome. Thank you, Indra. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking this time, Indra. I believe this was a great session. Thank you again.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you, Lamond. Thank you to Triumphant Christian Church, to Pastor G. I apologize if I enunciated that wrong. Very grateful for the work you do for your own community, but also for the whole of Bridgeport. So thank you, and I appreciate you giving me the time to be a part of your community and sharing. So I am very grateful.
Awesome. Thank you, Indra. So we're very grateful for Indra today. I believe this was a great resource for our community. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We definitely can get you some more information concerning Indra if you need it. For those that know, this is our month of capacity building. We definitely have some more sessions coming up this month. Please feel free to continue to check out the Triumphant Christian Church Facebook page to see what are the upcoming sessions. Thank you all so much, and we truly appreciate you. Have a great night.
Thank you for joining us for our Capacity Building 2020. Capacity Building 2020 is our month of a strategic process in which we grow and develop, increasing our ability to serve. Now join us as we begin our session.